Thank you, Monisha. Happy to be here. I'm Swathi. I am a mom. That itself makes you inclusive in so many ways, isn't it? I'm the founder director of Ishanya India Foundation. We are a center for rehabilitation and empowerment of persons with disabilities. And I consider all the students who come to us as also my children, although we do have some of them who are much, much older, to me. Well, how did my inclusion journey start, right? Um, Actually, I think, I grew up in a household where my grandparents loved to feed people. Anyone who was home was made sure to be well fed before they left. People were generally, taken really good care of, whether it was one of grandpa's student or the maid or just anyone, everyone were included, fed, taken care of. And I think this sort of builds foundation, right, to so many things. I still remember, so vividly. So many people would call on a day-to-day basis for something or the other. Maybe they had a problem or they wanted to learn something, various reasons. And when they came, he made sure that something that they really like to eat, was cooked. And then I saw my parents, doing the same thing. So I think this, constant, I would say, constant act of kindness that left a deep impression on me. It wasn't like when I think about it now, I feel like it wasn't really just about the food, right? It was really about that feeling of belonging, of being seen and cared for. I think that foundation sort of I would say, built within me a sense of compassion, a desire really, to make others feel comfortable, to be included. And I think that is what really taught me the power of small gestures, I would say, and the importance of creating a space where everyone feels welcome. And that's what I try to do now. In fact, what I would also like to add here is, because I'm talking about my personal experience. My father and his friends, they started an organization called Premanjali Foundation. It's now a 30-plus-year-old organization, and my parents would take me there very often. At that point, they would run an orphanage, and I would spend a lot of time with those kids. And growing up, I think I got a lot more involved. I would get my friends, we would do a lot of activities, and they used to run multiple projects. And one was also a center for visually impaired. So I would just read books for them, I would listen to them sing. So now when I think about it, I really had no idea that all these experiences would make me the person I am today. They say, right, our paths to finding purpose can be shaped by childhood experiences. And I think that's what happened.
Absolutely. What I'm hearing actually, Swathi, is that, you had a brush with experiences which directly taught you life lessons on compassion right from the start, right? Not once you were a grown-up adult. And it was in your family culture, and that is coming through what you're telling me today. Do you feel that this is lacking in today's households, or back then, even, around you? What did you observe growing up? Did you find it happening in most of the households, or was yours one that would stand out being this way?
I wouldn't say it's lacking. Like even back then, a lot of our neighbors were also like that, very sharing. I could just walk into anybody's house and have lunch there, or just play around, do whatever, whether I had friends or not. Today, I wouldn't say, like I said, it's lacking, but I think the more nuclear we are getting, things are becoming a little, narrow. But I still feel, a lot of it is got to do with the family environment. Your attitude builds from there. So it's really important, I think, to nurture that right from a young age. I would say, of course, I was lucky, I was blessed that I was able to witness whatever I did with regard to what's happening in the family. But I think a lot of children these days do have that. There are so many places, there are so many experiences, but it's important as parents that we recognize that and sort of encourage them to, build on that.
You touched upon something which I think is a very valid point. Swathi, you talked about families becoming more and more nuclear and the spaces becoming narrower, right? And I think it has it is a very important part of the kind of culture that we see in the society and how it is directly
Yeah.
impacting the mindset.
Yeah.
Earlier days, and this is just my observation from having grown up and living the way that we all are today. I
Hmm.
remember back in our times, we had joint families. Our families were larger. Everybody had a
Yeah.
specific role to play, right, in that
Hmm.
household. And
Yeah.
raising children was not so much of was not considered so much of a added responsibility or something that you literally had to struggle with, because everybody in the
Yeah.
household somehow had a shared attitude towards it, right? And it wasn't
Correct.
just the mother who was bringing up the child or the father who was bringing up the child. And I think because of the number of families, family members being more in the units back then,
Yeah.
everybody contributed in some way or the other, either the grandparents or the uncles or the aunts or the neighbors who were very free again. But today, if you see, a lot of things attribute to the narrowing space, right? One, uh, dual income families, so both the parents are running out in the
Correct.
morning, the
Correct.
children are going to school, coming back, and sometimes they're coming back to closed door environments, right? And the only
Correct.
next release that they have is with their friends who are again having similar sort of environments that they are growing up in. But you do not have so much of your exposure with your grandparents or your uncles and aunts, except for weekends or maybe during the family vacation. So I think a lot of the time, that the children are actually spending today are in their school environments. And the school
True.
environments, if they do not expose the child to some sort of extracurricular or some activity which can when it give them that experience
Instill
of
in them
having
that. Correct.
empathy or inclusion or compassion, then the child is
Yeah.
actually slowly losing touch with these emotions that they are actually born with, right? And
Correct.
maybe somewhere in the humdrum, the parents are running between pillar and post, and how the infrastructure environment is in a city. It's
Correct.
tough to get from one place to another nowadays. So parents are literally just scuttling between point A to point B and back to point A the next day in the morning, which is their workplace. And I think
Correct.
somewhere in this humdrum, these
Hmm.
finer elements are getting lost, and we consider this
Yeah.
lack of inclusion, but actually it is the lack of time and the mindset space that one needs to feel
Absolutely.
feel for another person, or feel empathetic, or feel like including anybody for that matter, not just a person with a challenge, but
Correct.
include anybody in their space, in their private space.
True.
What is your observation? And this is just mine, so I'm just sharing mine to give you a bit of a cue. But what do you think is happening
No, I
from your point
completely
of view?
agree, right? Correct. I completely agree with that. In fact, what it reminds me of is we've been doing a lot of work in rural Karnataka. We work in 16 districts now.
Hmm.
And I feel like inclusion, whether it's classroom or generally as a society, right, is coming so naturally to them. Like sometimes I'm thinking, oh my God, that strategy, this strategy, how am I going to include this child? I need this technology. We're complicating things, I feel sometimes. Of course, technology can be a good thing. It will certainly add advantage, but sometimes all you need is just that mindset of, no matter what, I'm going to include this child and then I'll figure out what to do. So when,
Absolutely.
when we work with teachers, there's so much passion, and a lot of them travel quite a bit to reach their special schools or wherever they're working, right? But there's so much energy, the kind of teaching learning materials they have.
Hmm.
Honestly, like I'm thinking I should go on a field trip with all my team members to places like this, because it's a lot of learning with such minimum
Yeah.
resources, the amount
Hmm.
of work that's able to do, which maybe
Hmm.
I'm talking about the school setup. Similarly, in families, right, when we work with parents,
Hmm.
it's just coming very naturally. Oh, he's like, there was a parent who shared, ma'am, he's very good with his hands. So I'll
Hmm.
probably just take him into, farming. Why not? Right?
Hmm.
Where a lot of parents are thinking, oh, he needs to do that, he needs to do this. Are there opportunities in Bangalore? Should we consider moving there? There was this one parent said he's so good with his hands, he does all the work. I'm going to put him in farming. Great.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's just coming so naturally to them. So
Absolutely.
here I feel like, we're thinking too much. We're getting into too many technical aspects, strategies, and
Yeah.
policies and things. but there it's just
It's a
happening so
mindset, right? It's just the mindset. I think, like you rightly said, once you have the mindset, the way will always evolve, right? And there's no fixed, one size fits all solution for for the work that we are doing in this space. But if I had to ask you a very, very basic question, Swati, what does inclusion mean to you? It's
this
a
is
it's
a
a it's a
very
it's a tricky one
I don't
also.
know how to answer this.
I
But
know.
what I can say is, I strongly believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to participate, right, fully in the society, regardless of their background or their ability or any other factor for that matter.
Hmm.
And inclusion, I think it sort of ensures that everyone has a fair shot at success and just their, personal well-being. And we all know that there's strength in diversity, right? So
Hmm.
I feel, when different perspectives come together, the experience will be really something else. And if you really connect that to workplace, I really think that's how innovation is born, right? When different perspectives come together, you have something new that you're creating.
Right.
And when you look at the larger picture, when every single person, irrespective of the background, like I mentioned, can participate, I think the entire economy will thrive. So,
Absolutely.
like, if I have to look at our country, right, there's diversity everywhere, and we know that. But are we really inclusive? We're not. But there's definitely growing awareness. That's what I would like to share. And I think I want to take this moment to even acknowledge and appreciate the efforts of so many local organizations, so many NGOs who are sort of working tirelessly to empower various communities. Like here at Ishanya, we work with neurodivergence, but there are so many people working with so many other communities. So what I would say is, you know, I don't know if I can define inclusion, but I feel it's not just a moral imperative, right? This
Hmm.
is really essential for building a very thriving and a resilient community or a society. And with
Right.
regard to inclusion, we're definitely a work in progress.
Absolutely. And I think each one has a separate definition also, Swati. That's the beauty
Yeah,
of this concept, right? It is something that is a bare necessity in everybody's life. And it does not apply,
yeah,
like I said, it doesn't apply only to the marginalized communities or somebody, who feels challenged and unaccepted. I think inclusion is an act
correct.
where we all feel that we have an equal right, to in this shared space called the society that we live in. And somewhere I also feel it is a very trending concept which we
Yeah.
have started applying to workplace communities to try and create sustainable livelihoods. I think it's more like being treated today as a mechanical problem to solve. To create
Hmm.
inclusion is what we say, right? It sounds more like
Hmm.
a verb, like an act that we need to do, because the sense of it being there is missing. And I think that is
Hmm.
consciously being recognized today. That is what is coming of all the discussions that I've been having on this platform. And one of the reasons why I said, Ki, let's have these conversations, is because it's very important to share narratives of people who are consciously trying to create that act of creating inclusion, right? Because it's missing. And like you
Yeah.
rightly said, the narrowing space is a huge contributor to that, right? And I think
Yeah.
also somewhere, because Swati, I've seen the workplace culture evolve, right? And we've all seen it, I think, over the last 2 or 3 decades of evolution in our country itself, where workplaces which were not so large at one point of time is
Hmm.
today grown magnanimously, right? Today India is the back
Yeah.
office of the world. And
Correct.
it is also the ground, or the ground that is actually giving birth to a lot of entrepreneurs today, or startup icons. Now when you have such large workplace cultures which are erupting all around you, which also
Hmm.
means you can create livelihoods. So gone are those days where a person living with some handicap or some challenge would be left aside, and had to go around doing some sort of a basic
Hmm.
sustainability, sort of a livelihood, where they could just barely sort of take care of themselves. They were considered a
Yeah.
burden. today it is very, very possible to upskill everybody and get them a place where they can earn with dignity, right? And they can support
Correct.
themselves. And if this
True.
practice is continued consciously, I think we can get more and more people to contribute to, like you rightly said, the economy of the nation itself. Swathi, going now, just steering away from the personal and the subjective approach, what are you doing from a professional standpoint with Ishanya? Why don't you give us a little in-depth, insight into that?
I'll just give you, how this whole thing started, right? For me,
Sure,
why
sure.
I started Ishanya. So I did my master's in clinical psychology, and I had some amazing internships as part of that as well. But post my graduation, I started working in a hospital, and I would meet a lot of families, work with them on different issues. I was often referred child cases, and that's how I got to meet so many families with children with disabilities. So I would conduct assessments, psychoeducate the families. I would write recommendation reports with the guidance of my mentor. Initially, it was all very exciting, when you're working with families, writing those reports. It was an exciting period. But eventually, I started wondering how my recommendations were put to use, because I was not always part of the intervention. So I would give out these reports, and then a lot of times families wouldn't come back. And that started bothering me. So this made me realize that I really don't want to be the person who simply gives out strategies, but, take necessary action to bring about visible changes. So that's how Ishanya was born. I did my master's later on in special education, did a lot of background work, worked with many students with intellectual and developmental disabilities and across different age groups. And we started Ishanya in 2015 with just the sheer love for teaching students who think, communicate, and learn differently. And one thought, that was always there on my mind, and we continue to do that today, is that every individual, they deserve to be looked at for their strengths. Like if you look at all the models, everything is just so deficit based. Like when I'm doing remediation, the first thing I'm doing is, oh, what are you bad at? How am I going to spend all my time remediating that? Right? And that really it's not sustainable. It will not go well for the student, it will not go well for the educator as well. So
Hmm.
what we do instead is sort of try and use a balanced approach. I know you have all these difficulties, but I also know you have all these strengths. So how am I going to leverage that to work on your areas of difficulty? Now, what happens with that is I'm not damaging their sense of self-worth, right? Like when
Hmm.
we work with adolescents, when we work with adults, you see that more than their diagnosis of autism, learning disability, etc., it's really their self-esteem.
Hmm.
It's just poor. They, they can't even come up and speak to you,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That's the
Hmm.
kind of, the narrative that they would have heard from
Right.
childhood. Good at that. Maybe I won't even take up. Maybe I won't even apply for this job. How will I even get selected? This is the kind of narrative that goes on. So
Right.
what we do, Shania, today is sort of, to change that narrative. So we leverage the strengths to work on the challenges, with social and financial independence being the final goal. So briefly,
Absolutely.
we do that.
Absolutely makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. And that is, I think, the right approach which lot of people today agree with, right? Gone are those days where remediation of what is not working or
Correct.
functioning in an individual was the approach. And absolutely.
Yeah.
Give us a live case example, Swati. I would love people to hear, uh, you know, real life, cases, if I have to put it that way.
Sure. So we worked with one boy. He came to us when he was 18. He had attended various training programs before, and when he came to us, he had, I would say, decent communication skills. He could communicate his basic needs. He could have a little interaction. He was somebody on the spectrum, and his computer skills were okay. When I mean computer skills, he could switch on the computer. He could type things on MS Word. He could recognize icons of PPT and Excel,
Hmm.
etc. And there was a lot of stubbornness to just work, right?
Hmm.
Like no matter what you tell him, he would just sit. He didn't want to do anything. Then obviously, it took us a few months. Few months went on to venure just to understand where is this coming from. Like, why is there so much reluctance to just work? And then we realized that it was because, he would just put in so many trainings,
He was
and that
demotivated.
didn't lead, and that didn't really lead to anything. So he was just demotivated. He's like, I'm just doing one thing after the other, and that's really frustrating me. And what we didn't know, which we got to know later on, was that he would get extremely aggressive with the mother at home. Like, there are times that she would call us telling, I've locked myself in the room because he's just out of control. And we've seen her come here, to the institution with black and blue marks because he would have hit her. So that kind of, frustration, and that would lead to aggression. So then we changed our approach. Every decision making he did. We started working with him in such a way that obviously we had to treat him as an adult, right? And nobody likes to be dictated. Nobody likes to be told, you have to do this, you have to do that. We don't like it. Same thing with them. So we said, you know what, you are in charge from today. You tell me what you want to do and we will do that. So once he started understanding that, oh, I have control, I can decide whether I want to do something or not, he sort of became flexible. So we started telling him, this is a rigid brain, this is a flexible brain, basically examples like that. And that worked really well with him, where he got a chance to just be. There were days he would say, you know what, I really don't feel like working on MS Excel today because I'm just feeling, a little flustered. Is it okay? And say, completely, your choice. You do what you feel like. And then eventually it led to a point where we started giving him some choices. Then it led to a little more, I would say some inputs from our side. And he was okay to take those inputs. So we continue to train and work with him like that. And today he has been working with an MNC and he's been there for the last 4 years now.
Can I say something, Swathi? I can't find, when you were telling me this little story, I couldn't find anything abnormal. Did
Absolutely.
I can't. If I do the, let's say if I treat my teenage daughter the same way, she'll probably do exactly the same thing. And I'm only thinking that who decides that something was wrong with this child, right?
Correct.
Or something was so diverse with them. This is the beauty of it, right? When you compare apple to apple, like what we love doing naturally, and we think that, oh, this child is this way, this child is a little that way, and we think that, okay, this is where this child is neurodiverse or this child is less neurodiverse. And I keep thinking to myself when I hear these stories that, put yourself in the same place as somebody who you have labeled as being different. What would you do? And then you realize that you wouldn't do anything differently. I think there is a lot of presumption which happens, a lot of judgment that happens, right, on their abilities, on the way that they need to be treated, and so many of these kinds that we lose that personal touch that this individual is also just trying to be normal, just the way that anybody else is.
And absolutely.
What I'm also hearing from you, Swathi, is that this is how probably we need to change ourselves. And like they rightly say, that disability is not what happens with you on an individual basis. It is the manner in which the society meets you, right? It's the treatment that you're met with that creates that atmosphere of you being disabled, or the concept of you being disabled.
So we started working with one girl. This was a few years back, and she came to us when she was about 14-15. Had a lot of sensory issues, had a lot of transition issues. She wouldn't even enter our building, right? And we were like, what do we do? I mean, she's not even entering. How do I even work with her? And we had anyway decided to do a one-on-one approach, and that she was not going to be part of a group in the beginning. So the educator would just stand out and try and, make her comfortable. And then she reached a point where she started coming in. And like, now it just feels so stupid, but we were like trying to sort of figure out what level she was at. So we were presenting her with random activities and puzzles and a lot of things. And she was somebody who was non-verbal. And we're like, okay, you know what, there's an AAC app, why not introduce that? Let's see if there's something that she can do. So it took us some time to sort of introduce and train her, and she was pretty quick in how she sort of got hooked to that. And that was the beginning, right? Like she just started typing. So we were trying to teach her ABC when her potential actually was to write a book. So thanks to, and she's published, so many books. She has a blog and all of that right now. So
Amazing.
we didn't know. So what I would say is, like you mentioned about the environment and how the society judges, right? So I think even those with really high support needs, the disability can often be minimized with the right environmental factors, with the right
Absolutely.
support and the guidance. Right? And this
Absolutely.
is a clear example. I think it was really our inability to look at it in the first place. But then I'm so glad that we were able to sort of figure out what she needed. And that
Understand.
made a lot of difference to her.
Sometimes it feels like the solution lies in coming halfway from, to meet each other, right? It's never that
Yeah.
I have all the solutions, you can come and take it from me. It's never something that can be produced as a service. And this is what I
Correct.
keep telling parents, because I'm not a counselor, or I'm not a special educator, but I know that I'm a special educator for my own child, right? And for me, in my personal journey, I think it started with me coming and meeting her halfway, rather than being all knowing and saying that, okay, I know the right direction in which I can send this child to grow up. And I realized that if a parenting journey can be so much full of unlearning, right, rather than learning, that maybe that is where the solution lies, and that is maybe what every system needs to adapt, right? Whether it is a system where you are creating jobs, or it is a system which is trying to make education inclusive, or you're trying to give special education services to a community which requires this special attention. I think one of the reasons where a lot of the so-called people with challenges or disabilities are suffering today is the lack of these services, or the the provisions that are available, right, in around them. And I don't want to blame anybody. I think somewhere parents need to unlearn first, give them that environment at home, so that the fear can be reduced. Because obviously when when a child is born with sensory issues, you would want to provide them a calming atmosphere first, right? And then if they have locomotor challenges, you need to have again a different kind of calm that around them, which gives them access to their environment. And if that correction starts from home, the child feels more promoted, or more encouraged to go and fetch any other skills that they need from the atmosphere, or the environment, or the society, or the service providers around them. And I think somewhere we need to start counseling parents, Swathi. I don't know how you feel about that, but if you ask me honestly, because I meet more parents and then their children with different kinds of disabilities, I seriously feel a huge vacuum in that direction. And I was having this conversation with Mukta the other day, and Mukta is a parent of of her son who is also autistic, and she was saying that somewhere in our country, the counseling space, family counseling space, or the or the specialists who are available, who can counsel parents once their children are diagnosed with some disability, is so weak that maybe the first rung of our the problem of ladders is right there, that the parents, if they can get counseled, because obviously the medical practitioners are not equipped to do it, and that whole gap between the medical health and the mental health is missing there. Have you given that some thought? Do you land up automatically doing that with the parents of your children? What is your take on that?
Psychoeducation, counseling is part of our day-to-day work that we do at Ishanya. And you meet different kinds of parents, right? Like some of them just come with that understanding that I know this is the thing, and just tell me what to do. What steps do I need to take? So they're very active. They want to equally contribute. So they're a lot more involved. And the set of parents who think this is like a mechanic shop. Sorry to use that word, but they literally tell you in such a way that I have to repair their child and send him back.
Some missing component has to be plugged back in and fix them. Absolutely.
Exactly, right? So that's a very, very challenging one, because there's so much of denial. But I mean, I do understand where they're coming from, right? Like just like there's stages of grief, there's stages of acceptance here as well.
Also, Swati, they live with a lot of social stigma. I think they kind of land
Absolutely.
up accepting that burden from, the hearsay of people around them, their
Correct.
own family members,
Correct.
etc., which is so not necessary, right? At the end of the
Correct.
day, what can anybody do if you have this as a task to live with? You can't do, right?
Correct.
The first level is acceptance, even for the parents. Ki boss, this is my child, and I have to do the best that I can for this child, right? I cannot give up, I cannot abandon, I cannot sort of scorn this, child, or my, curse my destiny or my fate. And that first level of dignified acceptance is what I think is required for the parent and somebody to get them to do it. Because if that step gets missed, you lose a lot of years in that early intervention period, Swathi. I've seen
Correct.
that
Correct.
happen, and it's really heartening because that is where that child grows up with fear rather than the confidence that is required. Ki, okay, you know what? I don't have a disability, and that is what the child needs to feel from day one. Maybe something is not working, but it's not my disability, and that fear of being disabled, right? And that stigma then passing down to a young
Yeah.
mind, that is the
Yeah.
scariest part to me, if you ask me
Correct.
honestly.
Correct.
By the time they come to you for help, you know
Mm.
it is already like, the damage is done so much that you have
Yes.
so much more to solve than if they would have come earlier. And maybe that early
Absolutely.
intervention is then getting completely missed out.
Like I mentioned, counseling and psychoeducation is part of the work, that we do at Ishanya. And sometimes what is really disturbing is, a lot of parents who have older children, maybe 18 plus, right? They still have acceptance issue. So they come back and say, why does he communicate like that? Why does he stim like that? It's very embarrassing when we go out. So I'm
Hmm.
thinking, oh my God, like this had to happen right at a very young age when probably early intervention was happening. And it hasn't
Hmm.
happened, like you clearly mentioned, it hasn't happened. So there's a lot of things that we will need to do. And no matter what we say, how much we do, right? They're still, they're very bitter about it. And
Hmm.
that feeling just doesn't go away that easily. And no matter, and so when we work with neurodivergent individuals, we have to measure success very differently, right? I can't go by the neurotypical standards of how I'm going to measure his progress. So when
Absolutely.
we talk about this to parents, they are like, no, ma'am, but he's not able to write in one single line, or he's not able to do mental math. Like, where do we do mental math? We use our calculators. As long as he's able to solve a problem, maybe, exchange money and is able to handle it, that's perfectly fine. So, our discussion, our counseling sessions with parents happen almost on a day-to-day basis. And
Hmm.
with different age groups, the challenges are different.
I was going to ask you this, Swati, and good you mentioned this before itself. This interaction with the parents while you are, nurturing that the child, right? Uh,
Yeah.
does it happen alongside? And I'm just trying to picturize this because I'm not in
Mhm.
the space that you are in, the built
Yeah.
space that you are dealing with, the children. Are the parents involved during the day-to-day exercise of you, interacting with the children, or is it like a after school hour discussion that you have, that today we did
Yeah.
this? And how is that interaction with the parent?
It depends on the age group. With younger ones, yes, we do invite them to be part of the sessions,
Hmm.
especially when we're trying to sort of figure out what kind of a learner is he, what works the best, how is he at home, and it's a discovery phase, right? And
Hmm.
obviously, children are different in different settings. So parent is part of it. We invite them. They're part of the sessions. They observe what happens. There are some things that we want them to do at home as well, especially when the child is non-verbal and we're probably looking at introducing AAC. There's a lot of
Hmm.
behavioral change that you expect at home as well. So we
Sure.
we train them and that happens together. But anything else, we do it, of course, separately,
Hmm.
where we are discussing these issues. But when we are making our curriculum plans, and if the child is able to sort of verbalize or at least put it down, then
Right.
we include that as part of the plan as well, because we really believe we shouldn't be doing anything about them without them, right?
Got
So,
it.
and especially with our adolescent adult population,
It's
we
very
we give
important.
them choice. Yeah,
Absolutely. Where even the young adult is involved in the planning of their
correct,
curriculum. Absolutely.
correct.
Can I ask you something very brashly? And I'm just thinking that why can't a module like this be available in regular schools? Why do we have to have a brick and mortar environment, which is a special school outside the regular, schools. And I'm asking, is this like something that cannot be done? Because I grew up in a school which had a special section, a sub building in the campus where we had special educators who would take care of, children who were neurodiverse. But the only problem that I saw there was that all kinds of, children with all kinds of disability were packed in that section. And that's the only thing that I didn't agree with, because I did my schooling right from nursery till my 12th in the same institution. What is your take on this, Swathi? Because this is something that I have been debating with a lot of people, that why can't our regular educational institutions become inclusive and have all of this given to them, given to their children community, the parent community in the same building?
There isn't a right answer to this, right? I mean, for each child, honestly, it's different. I think some children do require an environment that's a little more understanding of them, a little more accepting of them, especially those with sensory difficulties, with communication challenges, those who are non-verbal. Just managing such a different environment with so many people and too many changes that would happen in a regular school, maybe just really too much for them to manage. So I would say for such children, it's better if they're in a setup that's a little more accepting of them. They know what to do, they are comfortable, and at the same time, they're learning and thriving. So I don't see why that is wrong. Having said that, we do work with a lot of people with learning disabilities. I'm not talking about autism, I'm talking about learning disabilities. It could be dyslexia, dysgraphia. And they don't make it institutions like ours, honestly speaking, right? They can manage a mainstream setup, provided they're given the right intervention, that they have a special educator with whom they can work directly. I think they should be able to manage. They don't need a setup like that. But unfortunately, I mean, I'm not very happy about this, but we do have an NIOS program where we have children with learning disabilities studying here, where they can manage the regular setup, because everything else is absolutely fine, right? They're very, very smart. They're very social. In a way, it's worked out well for me because they're really good friends with those on the spectrum. They have a very unique friendship.
That's exactly what I was saying, and this is something that I have personally seen in my own daughter's case, where right at the early years, and I'm talking about some 12, 13 years back, when I started to venture out looking for an educational, institute where I could admit Kia. And Kia has a locomotor disability because of her rare genetic disorder. So I was directed to a special school, and I was told that, she has to go to a place where she will get attention, etc. And that environment had a lot of neurodiverse children. So, cases where children were autistic, they had learning disabilities, and she was kept in that environment. If not for the principal of the special school, Swathi, I would have never fought my way back into the mainstream education system at all, because she was the one who told me that, Monisha, apart from her physical challenges, Kia has no problem cognitively, right? And she's smart, and in fact, she's even more smart than I would have, noticed anybody her age. So you have to find your way back. But, there were problems like, for example, she couldn't hold her pencil because she had tremors. I mean, her condition was such that it was a neurological condition. So she was weak, her nerves would cause her to tremble, and she had no grip. So that was her issue. And maybe the earlier years it was a little more obvious, it was felt more because it was a frail constitution. She had a very frail body. But over the time, and I kept persisting, I kept going, I had to change schools because nobody would, admit her for a long time. So on a trial and error basis, we kept on, changing her schools. And today she is, she does everything that a normal child her age is able to do, other than walking and running. And, and it is because of pursuing in that direction. I'm only thinking this time and again. I do understand that, children have different kind of disorders, whether it is locomotor, whether it is neurological, whether it is, cases like severe autism. And autism, again, cannot be bracketed into one kind of, because it's a spectrum. But I'm only thinking that why can't the brick and mortar environment, why can't the building, and when I'm talking buildings, and I'm talking a large campus where, children have different sections, grades, why can't you have a building and an environment with the special education being imparted in the same campus, where the interactions can be controlled, right? But I'm only
Correct.
thinking, if you have a controlled, interactive atmosphere, maybe that is
Hmm.
how these children will learn how to go out in the society tomorrow and live with the rest of us, right?
Correct.
Someday after all of this is done, they have to be released into the society. They will have to start taking, or rather communicating with somebody who is considered absolutely able-bodied or able-minded, and they will
Yeah.
have to eventually work in an atmosphere which has everybody in it, right? Because that's how you create sustainable livelihoods. You cannot keep them in a closed door forever. So this is the only
Right.
mindset from where I'm coming, because I know internationally it's an accepted practice where in the educational institute, the larger educational institute, you have a sub body which takes care of
Absolutely.
children, and the children are graded as per their abilities, not their disabilities, mind you. And that is how special education is imparted to these children. I'm only thinking that maybe we are all doing some work, but we're not thinking of doing it together. And
Hmm.
somewhere, just like how I had to pursue it with mainstream educational bodies, if
Yeah.
special education organizations can start maybe discussing this with the regular conventional bodies, that
Yeah.
just give us space. We have the acumen, we have the trainers, we will manage the children, but we don't have to give them education in a separate location. Keep them
Got
away,
it. Yeah.
seclude them, and treat them.
Yeah.
And maybe that can be a little more comforting for parents. I'm only thinking loud. What is your take on this, Swati?
Sure. I mean, there are, many schools who are trying out that model as well. But I think, training, awareness and
Hmm.
training would definitely make that
Hmm.
sustainable, I would say.
Hmm.
Because without that, you're just burdening, people unnecessarily. You don't know
Hmm.
what to do. Helpless. You probably want to, but you don't know what to do. So I think
Hmm.
training is really the key there, right? And sometimes when I think about all these things, I mean, disability is always an afterthought,
Right.
right? Like whether it is infrastructure, education, employment, disability is always an afterthought. But if you think about it, disability is just one birth away or one accident away. Anything can
Absolutely.
happen anytime.
Absolutely.
So
And
absolutely, I mean, when you talk about integration or inclusion and how
hmm.
a lot of schools work there in the West, it's definitely doable here. It will
Hmm.
probably benefit a lot of students, like students like I mentioned, who come here as well for completing their education.
Hmm.
But what is imperative for that to be successful is really good training and having that sort of ecosystem, right? That will
Right.
provide them all the support required under one roof.
Right. So if I, if we, let's say, deep dive into this a little more, and I'm only thinking that nowadays you have so much of CSR happening from corporates, right? Where they're spending on
Yes.
education, where they're supporting marginalized communities, etc. And I'm only thinking that a life of a child living with some disability is a little more expensive than a regular child, right? Because obviously the family needs to spend a little more on providing them various sort of special skills through special
Correct.
educators, etc. I'm only thinking that if, let's say, educational organizations consider this as a CSR vertical, right? Just like how
Mm.
you and me are trying to gather CSR attention for the work that we do, if this becomes a part of mainstream education system, where the education organizations, a mainstream education educational body looks at this as a non-profit way of imparting special education to a community of children who are either neurodiverse or require special aids and things like that. One, it will support the family. Second, it will at least maybe start introducing mainstreaming of these individuals into society. Because I think
Mm.
unless you have an intervention at the education level, and education is a must of different kinds to every individual,
Correct.
because skilling is
Correct.
an important activity, you will never be able to prepare them for jobs or some
Correct.
form of employment or some form of earning a living. And today, if you see the workplace culture or the conversations in the workplace atmosphere that is taking place, people are talking about diversity, hiring diverse, hiring inclusive, etc. So this gap in between maybe can be filled if that approach is in place, isn't it? Because
Absolutely.
how else will you find a population to hire diverse or
Correct.
inclusive if they are not brought
Absolutely.
up to that speed or level? isn't
Please
it?
do
This
for us, right?
is one missing link, honestly, Swati, that I have uh, that is obvious to me, and I'm just a common person, right? I'm not
Correct.
like a
Correct.
skilled psychologist or somebody who's trained in this space. And I'm only thinking that today, if workplaces are talking so much about hiring inclusive, then where are we going to supply the population for them to hire inclusive, right? If there is no upskilling being done in mainstream education bodies, you need to have
Absolutely.
accreditations, you maybe need to have different boards, you maybe need
True.
to have
True.
different curriculums, you need to have a recognized system of providing this kind of talent. What's your take? I'm really keen to hear this from you.
No, you're 100% right, right? And thing is, when we work with companies, right, they come back and tell us, give me only graduates. Like, where are they? There's no access to education at all for so many of them. And when it comes to employment, we're talking about neurodivergence being competitive advantage to companies. Why is the same philosophy not being spoken about at the education level, right? No school is telling, I'm going to be inclusive, I will include children with autism, etc., etc., right? Very
Ab-
few schools do that at the
abs-
true level, right? They don't do that. But again, when it comes to CSR, right? I don't know. I mean, it's a very challenging thing. I mean, this is a struggle that we are facing, right? Because, like I mentioned, on one hand, there's this inclusive recruitment, etc. They want to hire people and they want only graduates and etc. etc. And here, there's no access to education. Although there are policies, nothing really, is happening. And then when we work with corporates to help train our candidates, they say, sure, can you do it in 3 months? Can you do it in 6 months? I'm like, no, that's not how it works with neurodivergent individuals. In fact, a lot of training we provide is individualized. It takes a lot of time, but it's
mm,
worth doing because you will have your next set of workforce ready when you invest in
absolutely.
training programs like that, right? So
Absolutely.
that's a discussion. That's a discussion that we continue to have with corporates. I
Hmm.
really think before they look at inclusive hiring, they need to spend time understanding the community,
Hmm.
really
Absolutely.
understand what
Hmm.
is going on, what therapies are required, how is the education system, why is it not inclusive, what more can be done. Like,
Right.
truly understand the community, then look at inclusive hiring. Otherwise, you're simply starting a program that is not going to be sustainable.
Absolutely, Swati. And I think this is a holistic sort of approach, right? And somewhere I know we are all doing a lot of work in our own areas, but somewhere I think, if the conversations can be carried forth into boardrooms, into people we talk to who are at levels of creating a change, uh,
Correct.
maybe small things can happen. It will never happen maybe either top down from the government downwards or from the society upwards. I don't think we can say that this is the right approach or that is the right approach, but we need change makers who are going to, I think, disrupt, just
Yeah.
like how you have entrepreneurs disrupting in so many spaces in the industry today. I think somebody
Mhm.
needs to disrupt the education space, somebody needs to disrupt the employment space, and we need more disruptors, positive disruptors and change makers in the society today. I
Agree.
have, I think, been urging all the change makers that I come across, and there's so many amazing people doing wonderful work, that
Yeah.
maybe it's time to pace up, maybe it's time to
Mm.
stop treading carefully and take
Yeah.
those big bold moves, make those big bold moves ahead. Because if you ask me, resources are available today. You have
Absolutely.
channels of
Yeah.
getting financed, you have channels of training special educators, you have even a community who is aware that yes, the child is special, needs special attention, and we need to, and parents are saying that yes, we need help, right? Gone are those days where parents would keep stay mum about it and say that, oh, no, no, I don't want to let anybody know that we have children
Correct.
who are born different. But when
Correct.
you have so much happening in the and the awareness is probably the reason why, when people are even that much aware, I think we need to get those spaces disrupted and find solutions quickly. And it will happen.
Sure.
I am a believer that with conversations you can change minds, and we need to start
True.
talking more. Somewhere while we are doing what we are doing, we need to have these parallel conversations, and people need to be maybe thinking in the same direction. So
Correct.
wonderful conversations, Swati. I think these conversations make us not just aware of different thoughts that people have, but also maybe, sprout us in the direction of thinking in spaces that we have not otherwise thought about. But before
True.
we move towards the end of the podcast, with the work that you're doing with Ishanya, what is your ask from the society and from the people who are listening to us today? What would you want to receive as a support from those around you?
When we work with families, right? We work with young children, we work with adolescents, we work with young adults, adult population, and a lot of parents who come to us, they don't really understand why all of this is required. Why does it take so many years? What am I working towards? So our conversation is really about moving towards building pipeline towards livelihood, right? Sustainable livelihood. And for that to happen, and we have several success stories now where we're able to complete that cycle, right? Where they've started off as like really young children, and then they move forward, and then they upskill themselves, they get trained, they're able to find a job, sustain the job, etc. So, and since the pandemic now, we've been seeing like an increased interest by companies, corporates to hire neurodivergent individuals. But somewhere I feel we're finding it difficult to find the right partners. We're currently working with a number of companies to factor in the idea of an extended training program, along with, let's say, long-term internships, which can help our individuals gain the right skills. Again, like I mentioned, no access to education. Probably some of them have just completed their 10th or 12th, no graduation because colleges are not being that inclusive, various reasons, right? So having a long-term training program and internship would help them acquire the right skills so that they can be placed at the right job. But unless we do this consistently, right, we may not even know what works and what doesn't. Because compared to a lot of other countries, the ground reality here is very different. Again, no access to education, although there are policies in place, and we can't just go by white papers as on best practices, right? Because
absolutely,
it just doesn't apply to our cultural context a lot of times. So my ask is that we really need companies to invest time, understand the community, especially because these disabilities are invisible, right? People with autism might be perceived as very unfriendly or unmotivated, lazy, lacking social skills. These are the kind of things we hear, right? So my ask, right, from mainly the corporate sector, since the pandemic, I think we've been seeing a lot of interest by companies to hire neurodivergent individuals. But I would say it's becoming a little difficult to find the right partners. Because this can't be a checkbox item, no? They really need to be invested in this cause. We are working with, a number of companies right now to factor in the idea of an extended internship program, along with, long-term internships, which can help our individuals gain the right skills. So we feel that this actually can go a long way, in ensuring that they find the right opportunity, because that right job mapping is very, very crucial. Unless we do this consistently, we may not even know what works and what doesn't. Because, like we discussed, compared to a lot of other countries, the ground reality here is very different. And, most neurodivergent individuals do not have access to education, despite having all the policies, in place. From our right to education to RPWD to equal opportunity cell, we have everything, but nothing really gets implemented that well. So, we can't just go by the white papers on the best practices. That's what I'm trying to say.
Can I ask you something here, Swathi? So when you get any such intimation about a corporate hiring for from a diverse community, which is inclusive of people with disabilities, what is the process they follow? Do they just have job roles created from the back of their head, or do they check for skill sets which are already available from a community and then track that to the kind of roles that can be actually created for individuals with neurodiversity?
So with each company, it's been different so far. Some of them come with certain job roles, but then that won't help me in any way. It will have things like great communication skills, blah, 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 etc. That may not, apply to our candidates and they may not even apply as well. So when we work with companies, we do a detailed job analysis where we try and understand how a candidate's day looks like from morning till the time they log out. Right from, let's say if it's an in-person, job, then right from entering the gate to the kind of people they'll be interacting with, where his workstation will be, what is the environment, what kind of support is he going to get, what are the tasks, when will it be allocated, if the task doesn't come in on time, then what has to be done. So we do like a detailed job analysis, task analysis, and then we look at our candidates and the kind of skill set we have, and then we map. So when I know, let's say, for example, somebody is very process oriented, and the company has a role where there is a clear process, there's a clear run book that the candidate can follow, then I know that's a good match, right?
Got it.
So that's how we work. With some companies, there are roles that they create as well. Let's say, in between sort of roles, like a shared resources kind of a thing. Person A requires something, person, B also requires something. So can I create a role which will be like a shared resource who can help person A and B? Something that probably, my candidate is really good at.
Understood.
So we do separate job creations as well, but we do work around with job roles that the company has, but then we get into the details of it and really understand what it takes, for the candidate to work there.
Now you're talking about hiring for a specific kind of neurodiversity, which could be autism, right? Are you talking about only autism, or just across the whole range?
It could be autism. Yeah, it could be autism, it could be learning disability, it could be intellectual disability, it could be ADHD, right?
Got it.
So,
so the entire range of.
Another
Another question I wanted to ask, Swathi, maybe because it could be my lack of understanding of what Ishanya is capable of doing or is offering right now. So what I understood is that you are into training on an upskilling of individuals, children to adults from the neurodiverse community. That is one thing that I clearly understood. But second thing that I heard right now is that you're also working with corporates to map employment opportunities, right? So
Correct.
You have both ends of the spectrum. So you're not just training, but you're also training for employment.
Absolutely. So Ishanya has basically three verticals, right? We have education, we have livelihood, and we have capacity building. So education, think of it as a parallel school system, right? Those who are unable to go to a regular school come to us. We do a lot of skill development. We have our NIOS programs, etc. When it comes to livelihood, we have vocational training, where we train them on graphic designing. We have computer science courses. We do photo editing, video editing. We do coding classes, etc. That is the livelihood part. Then the capacity building part has two things there. One, where we work with corporates to build their capacity to in turn work with our community. And the other capacity building is called Samarthya, where we work in rural Karnataka. Like I mentioned, we work in 16 districts. So under the livelihood space, like I mentioned, we do vocational training. But the last leg of the training is the job readiness component, where we do a lot of, building of resume, preparing them for interviews, sort of self-advocacy training, etc. And this is when we start working with companies as well to look for job opportunities, internship opportunities, etc.
Got it. And Ishanya has what kind of a strength in terms of the workforce? Are you working with a lot of special educators only, or do you have people at different skill levels as well, even when it comes to offering?
It is a mixed group. Correct. It is a mixed group. We do, of course, have many special educators. We work with psychologists. We also work with computer science graduates because we use a lot of technology. We do digital literacy trainings. We do computer science coding training, etc. So we have people from that background as well.
Got it. And Ishanya is a pure NGO, or does it also create a revenue, or like a revenue stream or a couple of revenue streams for itself?
So we have a charitable trust, that's the NGO part. We also have a social enterprise where any work that we do with the corporates, sensitization programs, or we curate programs for companies. It could be, let's say, panel discussions. We do hackathons. Or we also do accessibility summits. So when we curate events like this, it comes into our social enterprise.
Got it. So this is a kind of a coin which has both the sides. It's not just a purely non-profit kind of a venture. Where are you headed, Swathi? You've been working in this field now for quite a few years. with your work, where do you think your future lies, or where do you see yourself going as a foundation?
Sure. So two things, right? One, like I was talking about, my ask with the corporates, right? So that's something that we're really putting in a lot of energy because we don't want this momentum to just, phase out. There is a lot of interest and we want to leverage that. So it's important that, as an organization, I invest a lot of time and resources in working with companies to
Right.
help them invest their time in understanding this community. So
Right.
before, in fact, when we work with companies, we tell them before you jump into hiring, look at volunteering opportunities or, look at awareness sort of sessions, trainings. So when they do things like this, there's a little more preparedness. Otherwise,
Right.
sometimes it feels like an uphill battle, right? I don't want to be failing candidates if workplaces are riddled with discrimination. It could be subtle or blatant. So there's a lot of energy moving there. But apart from that, we've been doing a lot of work in rural Karnataka. So what we do there is we're largely focusing on building the capacity of various stakeholders. And when I mean various stakeholders, it's caregivers, it's parents, it's special educators, it's grassroots level workers, your Anganwadi teachers, your ASHA workers. And in Karnataka, there are positions called village rehabilitation workers, multi-purpose rehabilitation workers. These are all frontline workers. Now, unless they know how to identify red flag signs for, let's say, autism or intellectual disability, learning disability, nothing will move. Right? They're literally moving from one house to the other, trying to gather data, trying to understand what each family needs. So we're working with them. We're training them to identify red flag signs, connecting them to local hospitals, helping them sort of build that ecosystem. And through this, we are working with the different departments of government as well. So we work with DDWO, education, health, women and child development, a lot of academic institutions. So basically our goal is sort of, build that entire ecosystem for the disability community.
Understood. And why not, right? Because it cannot be dealt with in a piecemeal manner like we were talking earlier. It has to not just be education, it has to be, even awareness to recognize the red flags, to actually early, level intervention that is required. And it cannot be just, done with the urban population. It has to be even at the grassroots level. But tell me one thing, Swathi, this is interesting. And I'm asking this purely from a commonplace kind of an approach. When you go to the grassroots and you talk about, awareness at different levels, what is the kind of acceptance and I heard you say earlier that the acceptance is higher, at the grassroots level compared to what it is at in an urban sort of a scenario. Give us a little more insight into that space, because I'm trying to understand that are the villages today a little more upbeat in their mindset? What do they take the necessary steps when they realize that yes, there is a case of early intervention that is required in their own family household? What has been your observation there?
So with each district, it's been a little different, but largely there is that openness to trying new things. They understand. I think acceptance is a little bit better in the initial stages, because they are like, okay, we're in some remote village and I know my child needs this. What can I do? Even if it means I need to travel 100 miles, whatever it is, right? I am going to make that happen. I'm going to do it. So we see a lot of, at least we've been able to meet a lot of parents who are very forthcoming. They want to be proactive, take action, do whatever is required. So that way it's been pretty good. But there are places where the literacy levels is almost zero, right? And they just know, they have no clue what is going on. And the child is just at home, is taken care of, is well fed, taken care of, but nothing beyond that. There's no access to anything. And sometimes, honestly, we feel really helpless, because even to suggest that this child needs speech therapy, occupational therapy, something, where do they go? There's absolutely nothing close by.
Swathi, what happens in that case? Is it's a case
in
lost?
In a lot of cases, nothing happens. Yeah. Nothing happens unless the family decides to migrate, to move somewhere else. Nothing really happens. They're like daily wage workers or probably farmers. So, but they're open to learning. So when we talk to them about these things, they're like, yeah, we understand.
And there is no way in which a unit can be set up from people who are amongst them, and I'm sure there are grassroots level teachers academicians,
Correct.
etc. But there's no way in which, probably someone, with the skill set like your team can actually do grassroots level training so that at least a village level unit can be set up. Huh.
There are resource centers like that have been created by the government. It's there. There are resources as well, but then there are no people to train. Like we've walked into so many districts where the resource center is there, but there are no professionals. There are hardly any professionals who would come there, once a week, twice a week, and that's not going to help, right? And in early intervention, there is a
Yeah.
lot of requirement. You will need to do speech therapy at least thrice a week. There's a lot of things.
Right.
Parents will need to do that at home, and the trainers would need to, sort of build the capacity of the parents. Nothing of
Absolutely.
that for this happening.
Swathi, honestly, at the back end, we were talking about how healthcare access is so weak in our country, right? I'm talking about regular healthcare access, and we are talking about now here intervention, health and mental health intervention at a much deeper level, right? Finer issues, as we call it. And I've seen this in every aspect of, be it physical health or mental health. The grassroots level access is missing practically in 80-90% of the rural population. And this is somewhere where I feel the biggest ask, if you ask me, Swathi, should be from the government to have policies and interventions which make it compulsory. Like, for example, in the medical profession, we all know that the first 2 years of 2 or 3 years of the medical professional, the moment you graduate and you come out, you have to spend in a non-urban sort of an environment, right? Where they have to give service. And I think this needs to apply to even the space of mental health, and make professionals from cities, from colleges graduate, from those graduating from colleges in the city, to actually make it compulsory in their curriculum to go and spend some time in the grassroots level, because otherwise you will never have that penetration happening at that level. No kind of no practices can be set up. You can't expect the rural population to run, and I'm sure cases are high even there. It's just that lack of awareness, lack of diagnosis, makes it a case kind of loss. Yeah, talk about it. Data is unavailable in almost every area, I think, because of the last census being so far away from where we are today. And unless and until I think these policy level interventions happen, where we are not just creating policies but looking at implementation at the grassroots level, these are all going to be urban topics, right? Where we can talk about it in English and say that, okay, just amongst us that this information needs to circulate. But I think one of the biggest asks should be that yes, we need government intervention at least for grassroots level, because maybe corporates can help with funding, but if you do not have policy interventions, we cannot make professionals available at that level to create intervention. And unless we do that, these are going to be a huge percentage of the population who is going to be suffering in silence.
One thing that that we had to work on was making resources available in local language, right? Like we needed to make everything in Kannada, and you should have seen the joy when we started training. Like no one ever has given us this kind of data on autism or intellectual disability in Kannada. So we created like this quick reference guides as well, everything in in local language. Explanation was in local language. So that really made a difference. Otherwise, everything is just so technical. They were finding it very difficult. There are a lot of training programs that happen from the government side, right? Of course, very few for the neurodevelopmental disabilities space, but there are trainings that happen, and everything is mostly in English. So this made a lot of difference. So I think, having this kind of information in local languages across, our country, that would really help.
Brilliant point. I think it's one of the most fantastic points I've heard in any of the conversations till now. I think having information available in local languages so that it can get disseminated easily, because otherwise imagine how will the communication happen. But tell me one thing, Swathi, is there like a network of organizations in your space who also consult between each other? They do sharing of good lessons learned, bad lessons learned. Do you have that network in the country?
Absolutely. At least if I have to talk about Bangalore, right? I think especially all the organizations working in the neurodevelopmental disability space, we're all very well connected. and we share, a lot of resources, or it could be like, how children are, right? They jump from one institution to the other, and
Absolutely.
I mean, so we exchange information because at the end of the day, it's helping the family, it's helping the child. So we
Got
do
it.
exchange information. I think that way, there is a lot of collaboration that is happening, and
This is
that's
within
definitely.
Bangalore, but what about the
We're talking
remaining,
about specifically,
the other cities,
I'm sure
states?
there are.
Hmm.
I'm sure there are. There's one community. I mean, it's a WhatsApp group, and there are professionals from various, cities and various states.
Got it.
There is a
But
lot of exchange
there
of
is no
information.
national level body which is sort of
There is
to which
there
everybody
is
is
one web
affiliated.
portal.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm,
No.
Not really.
Hmm.
No. There is
Hmm.
a web portal, Naidisha. I'm sure a lot of people know about it.
Yeah.
There, you do get a lot of information. Let's say I'm looking at a place to refer to one of our parents itself who is moving to another state. So my
Right.
quick
No,
reference guide is to
actually,
the website.
Prachi was on the podcast and she was telling me that this question was asked to her as well. That since they have done a lot of resource building,
Yes.
in terms of
Yeah.
information at a country level, is there
Correct.
any collaboration happening with the government to set up a unit which can, have some sort of a national level resource or directory or some sort of an affiliation given to all these resources so that there's some networking that can take place? Because otherwise, it is very difficult. Like, for example, I'll tell you, Swati, I'm an architect, right? So, and when you graduate as an architect, or let's say a doctor, for example, any of the professional courses that you do, you have a council to which you get affiliated. Even lawyers, for example, they have a bar council. We have a council of architects, architects across India. And what that affiliation, helps in achieving is, it sort of unifies all the resources that are available at a national directory level, and it helps to share that or make that information available across all the professionals. So some sort of a central repository, and that is something that I feel is required for the disability space in general. But because we are so many of us in this section of the society, it's very difficult to have like one disability body, like a recognized disability body which becomes a resource pool for every kind of disability, because that's going to be too much of information to even carry.
Rehabilitation Council of India, but then they have, their limitations as well. So I don't think there's anything, the way in which you are explaining, I really don't think there is anything. But if you look at one council body that oversees the disability sector, that would be RCI.
Loud thoughts again. Swathi, I had, but I can still ask you like 1,000 more questions on it, honestly, because I have that inquisitive bent of mind, but I'm only thinking that we cannot touch upon, so many aspects of this subject purely because, it's such a massive topic. Anything that you want to highlight before we leave? Otherwise, I've had such a gratifying time, at least for this session, that, I feel like arming myself up with questions and coming back to you again. But anything that you would want to share before we say bye for today?
Well, I would just say, I spoke earlier, disability is one birth away or one accident away. So this really can't be an afterthought. I think, more people need to start talking about it. There should be more awareness, more trainings, more people coming into the sector. We need a lot more professionals,
Absolutely.
and that I think, would really make a difference.
Absolutely. And awareness is the key. And, I come from the rare disease community, right? Where, even if we talk about early stage intervention or rehabilitation or a cure, all these words are amiss amongst us, right? Because out of the 7,000 known rare diseases that there are in the world today, just 5% of them have some form of a treatment. Otherwise, it is just a space where people are just living with their disabilities and struggling. It's a space where people are struggling, and I keep saying that let's create awareness. Let's talk about prevention, because for all with awareness, not only are you going to discuss early stage intervention in different aspects of this whole space of disability, but you'll also be able to prevent many of them, right? And that is what I think a country, a huge under stressed or a country like ours really needs, because here resources are very few, access is very, very select, and the fact that professionals are missing in so many aspects of
Correct.
intervention. So Swati, with that, I think I come to a close of today's discussion. It has been very gratifying just sharing this knowledge with you and hearing your side of what is happening and so much that is happening. I can only wish you the best from the deepest of my heart,
Thank
and
you.
hope to have more discussions in days to come where we can keep sharing
Absolutely.
about all the progress that you all are making. Thank you so much for
Sure.
making time for us today,
Thank
and
you,
have a
Monisha.
lovely
Pleasure.
journey ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
God bless.